So let's talk through each Space Marine chapter and which are the best units for them and why. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where today I thought we'd take a look at each Space Marine chapter from the core Space Marine Codex and go through a few of the units that I think are the strongest picks for them. In Codex Space Marines, of course, all units aren't equal. Some units are just generally strong. Things like Blade Guard, Eradicators, Attack Bikes, Redemptor Dreadnoughts. Vanguard Veterans, most of the Troops choices, and Apothecaries are pretty much going to be good choices just compared with the rest, no matter what chapter you bring them in. I have to try to bear the general strong things in mind a bit for the chapter selection, so a lot of these guys do crop up multiple times, but I have also tried to focus on which units play into each chapter's strengths to ensure we get at least a fair bit of variety. For each chapter I've tried to narrow it down to a top 3, then talk about a few other honourable mentions that I think are worth considering. If I miss anything, then please let me know down in the comments. In any case, let's jump straight into it, and we'll start with the Ultramarines. So the 3 units that I picked for the Ultramarines are Intercessors with Bolt Rifles, Inceptors with Plasma, and Chief Librarian Tigurius. The Bolt Rifle Intercessors are pretty much the ideal Ultramarine unit for holding the battle line. They can move and double tap up to 30-inch range. There's multiple ways to get them in the Tactical Doctrine turn 1, and between all the buffing characters that the Ultramarines have, even the standard Bolt Rifle can be insanely scary. I think that Inceptors with the plasma weapons are also quite a good fit. They can be quite potent, deep struck alongside a Lieutenant with the Seal of Oath that allows them to get completely full rerolls against one chosen target and just nuke something completely out of the game. Ultramarines don't really hurt them as well, seeing as they can fall back and shoot, which most Inceptors can't. Finally, Tigurius I think is going to be one of the most popular Ultramarines characters, standing at the heart of the army, hopefully giving everything nearby a 5+ invul save with Psychic Fortress, and making one important unit -1 to hit each turn. I think he adds quite a lot of value for the points that he brings. Other units that I think are quite relevant include Invicta Tactical Warsuits. You can deploy them up front and aggressive, ready for an alpha strike, and then use the Ultramarine stratagem to redeploy them back in your own lines if you don't get first turn. Guilliman and Calgar are both really good buffing pieces that are also incredibly scary in melee, and I quite like Leviathan Dreadnoughts with the Gravflux Bombards in an Ultramarines army. They want to get close and they have heavy firepower, but they're at least somewhat worried about getting locked up in combat. The Ultramarines can ignore that somewhat by allowing them to fall back and shoot. Generally with an army with quite so strong character buffs though, anything that's core is going to be a good shout. Eradicators and Redemptor Dreadnoughts certainly make lots of appearances in lists. Eradicators with the heavy melter rifles are particularly interesting in an Ultramarines army, as they could outflank with strategic reserve and then come on with no negative to hit. Next, let's move on to the White Scars. The 3 units I chose as perhaps the most prominent are Vanguard Veterans with Storm Shields and Lightning Claws, Captain Orcans on bikes, and Blade Guard Veterans. Vanguard Veterans with Storm Shields and Lightning Claws are pretty good in most chapters to be honest, but they really get a ton out of White Scars. Advancing and charging will get them across the board insanely quickly, and they can pay a couple of command points to go into their unique Assault Doctrine earlier, getting AP -3 and damage 2 on that flurry of attacks. Even when they're in melee, they can then fall back and charge again, making them a complete nightmare to deal with. The Biker Captain and Khan on Bike are similar for the advancing and charging, but I think they're often going to be included in a White Scars list, as well as being a melee powerhouse, they can also include some really nasty tricks. You can have Master of Snares to prevent units falling back, Warlord traits to give them insanely long charges, and can make use of the Biker stratagems and synergies that the White Scars have. Finally, Blade Guard Veterans I think are a good example of a slow-moving assault unit that really want to advance and charge. They'll be getting up the board far faster than their equivalents from other chapters, and again they'll absolutely love the unique Assault Doctrine, getting damage 3 on those swords. Otherwise, Corsaro Khan is a melee powerhouse and character killer all by himself. He provides excellent melee buffs to nearby units too. Auto Bolt Rifle Intercessors do a great job of using all of the parts of the White Scars tactics. They can advance and shoot their weapons for no penalty, and then also charge and deal decent damage in melee too. Finally, anything on a bike is likely going to be useful. Bikers, Outriders and Attack Bikes will certainly all have their place. For my favourites for the Iron Hands, I've gone for the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought with character protection, Grav Cannon Devastators in a drop pod, and either Redemptor or Leviathan Dreadnoughts. I think the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought is worthy of special consideration, as you can make it a character with the March of the Ancients stratagem, then load it out perhaps with a couple of las cannons and a Typhoon missile launcher, and you've then got a very powerful anti-tank piece that your opponent can't directly target with their guns. It can be very frustrating to have quite so much of your firepower shielded in the heart of your army. Grav Cannon Devastators in a drop pod can work quite well with a few armies, but they're particularly good on Iron Hands. They get their unique Devastator doctrine for free turn 1, and that allows the Grav Devs to turn up wherever they want to on the board, get out, still hit on 3s, and even reroll 1s to hit at AP -4. They can then use the Iron Hand stratagem for exploding 6s to wound, which really amps up their damage against high toughness targets. Finally, with all their vehicle synergies, Iron Hands are excellent places for Redemptors or Leviathans. They'll be a bit tougher with the Feel No Pain, degrade slower, and Iron Hands have lots of stratagems, character buffs and psychic powers, all of which make vehicles stronger, tougher, or repair wounds on them. Otherwise, Iron Father Phyros can make some very durable infantry with his 5+ invul bubble. I think the scout units lacking cursors can be particularly handy in Iron Hands, seeing as they're all out on their own, they just want to be durable, and Iron Hands gives them that nice Feel No Pain save. And basically, if you've got any Space Marine units that either have heavy weapons or are vehicles, they tend to be just that little bit stronger in Iron Hands. Next we have their brothers in black power armor, the Raven Guard, and I feel they're quite an interesting army as their chapter tactics and options do push them in a few different ways. I've chosen Vanguard Veterans, Eliminators and Assault Centurions as the 3 picks. Vanguard Veterans as they can make great use of the pre-game move that Raven Guard can get, jumping into the midfield and getting very easy turn 1 charges off. They have a couple of stratagems and warlord traits that particularly work well with jump infantry too, so are a solid choice for multiple reasons. I think Eliminators are always going to be an interesting option. They get +1 to hit and wound against characters, which means they should be hitting on 2s even if they have a -1 to hit and wounding them very easily indeed. Finally, Assault Centurions are powerful on Raven Guard as they really need to get close despite being very slow, and Raven Guard can put them in deep strike for just 1 command point and then maybe coordinate with a chaplain to hopefully allow them to charge. I think that Raven Guard can be really solid with multiple things though. Eradicators are pretty potent with deep striking. Blade Guard Veterans can make good use of that Warlord trait to allow 1 unit to start up right in the midfield and do a first turn charge, and Kavan Shrike himself is a fast and powerful melee character who's a pretty decent choice for leading the units into battle. Next up we come to the Salamanders, and the top choices that I've picked are either Eradicators or Attack Bikes for anti-tank duties, Aggressors with Flamestorm Gauntlets, and the monstrously tough Captain on Bike. The Eradicators and the Attack Bikes don't really need much explanation. They're already insanely efficient anti-tank platforms, and Salamanders give them +1 to wound in Tactical Doctrine, and then also get that bonus reroll to wound, which is great on high-strength weapons. Aggressors with Flamestorm Gauntlets are also a pretty well-rounded threat to anything that they can get their hands on. With their stratagem for max shots, you can get a crazy 72 auto hits with a big unit. Again, all at +1 to wound and -1 AP when they're in their Tactical Doctrine. They can also add to the weight of toughness 5 wounds on the table, as Salamanders do seem to get on quite well with the Gravis profile and can be quite intimidating when they're putting forward a war of almost entirely toughness 5 Marines. They can make some incredibly strong character builds as well, in particular that crazy strong Captain on Bike with a toughness of 7 and -1 to wound, so even things like las cannons will only be wounding him on 4s, and things like assault cannons will be wounding on 6s. Combine that with a 2+ save and 4+ invul, and you've got a unit that really isn't going to die anyway reasonably. Otherwise, anything tough and mighty is usually a good shout. Blade Guard Veterans can make good use of the +1 to wound stratagem, and can be a good choice for self-sacrifice to protect a more fragile unit. Stern Guard Veterans in drop pods with Combi Melters or Combi Flamers can make great use of the Salamander's Melter synergies, and Adrax and Vulcan are both interesting leader characters. Adrax is a complete melee powerhouse, where Vulcan can give you some seriously good rerolls with Melters or Flamers. Next we have the Imperial Fists, and the 3 units I chose here are Intercessors with basically any bolt rifle, Captains or Chapter Masters with the Eye of Hypnoth, and Inceptors with Assault Bolters. As I've said in a few previous videos, Imperial Fists just really aren't in the strongest spot right now, and they have to lean quite heavily into their bolter buff as they don't have all that much going for them compared with the other chapters. Having said that, I think that Intercessors are really quite a strong damage dealing unit. Ignoring cover and exploding 6s on their bolters are just going to make them that bit stronger. Combine that with a few rerolls and using the rapid fire stratagem, and you've got a hefty amount of damage coming out of them. Heavy Intercessors could be a very interesting option as well. For shooting buffs, a Captain or Chapter Master can be very efficient indeed, giving reroll 1s to hit with their normal rule, and then reroll 1s to wound with the Eye of Hypnoth, so you can have basically a Captain and Lieutenant all in one. Finally, for a bit of mobility, I think that Inceptors with Assault Bolters can be fairly efficient in the Fists, maybe dropping down in turn 2 when in Tactical Doctrine. They're far more efficient here compared with when in other chapters. Otherwise, I basically say that you're looking at firepower units of virtually any sort. For anti-infantry units, you mainly want anything with a bolter, such as Devastators with heavy bolters, Centurions with hurricanes, or maybe Eliminators with bolt snipers. They also have some synergy with the anti-tank weapons. Maybe units like Devastators with las cannons or attack bikes with multi-melters can have some good use. They'll get +1 damage against vehicles in the Devastator doctrine, and they can also use the Tank Hunter's stratagem for +1 to wounds. Next up we come to the Black Templars, and the top units that I chose to pick were the Chaplain on bike, Crusader squads, and either Vanguard veterans or Terminator assault squads to be the main damage dealers. Firstly, for the Chaplain, Black Templars just have amazing litanies, particularly their 5+ Feel No Pain one that they get on their own roster, but their Master of Sanctities in general are pretty good, as they can reroll litanies with that Ancient Breviary relic. With the speed, toughness and melee prowess that the Chaplain on bike can get, I think he's perhaps one of the best platforms to deliver those litanies. Next, at 15 points per model, Crusader squads are just very cheap for what you get. For the points, they will tend to outfight most of the other troops choices, not because they're better, but just because they're a good 5 points less than most of them. I'm still not sure that you necessarily want them to be your main damage dealers, but they can be very good for holding backfield objectives, leaving more points free to charge to the front. For the actual main damage dealers for the army, I'd be looking at Vanguard veterans or Assault Terminators. Black Templars have a number of different ways to make melee nastier between those litanies, good buffing characters, getting the Assault Doctrine early with the Crusader Helm, and having powerful units with which to use their very nasty Devout Push stratagem. It's hard to go wrong with a whole load of jump pack guys with Storm Shields and Power Weapons, or a solid advancing wall of Terminators with Thunderhammers and Storm Shields. For some other choices, Apothecaries are great in basically any Space Marine army, but can be particularly nice in Black Templars, as they can bear the Crusader Helm and make their Feel No Pain aura a big 6 inches rather than the more weedy 3. I could be sold on any of their unique characters, High Marshal Helbrecht, Grimaldus or the Emperor's Champion, with Chaplain Grimaldus I think being particularly strong for the points that he costs. Cenobite Servitors are just an excellent cheap chaff unit, only 18 points for a unit to do an action, screen an area or get in a table quarter. And while Land Raiders aren't really very good in game, you'll certainly get fluff points for using them. Now for the Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels, I've chosen Sanguinary Guard, Blade Guard veterans, or various builds of fighty characters that they can muster. Sanguinary Guard are amongst one of the strongest Space Marine melee units in the game, only 30 points for 2+ armor save wounds, and a great general purpose melee weapon that'll deal with virtually anything, and really good synergy with the Blood Angels +1 to wound, meaning that they'll even cut through battle tanks on the wound roll of a 4+. As jump infantry, they also have loads of Blood Angel synergies, get full rerolls when they're nearby the Warlord, are -1 to hit in combat, and even get a heroic intervention stratagem that can be really handy when they're parked on an objective. Sanguinary Guard are just an all-round excellent unit, and for me are very near in auto-include status within the Blood Angels decks. Blade Guard veterans are certainly an alternative though, if you're going for a bit more of a different flavour. Despite the 2+ armour, Sanguinary Guard aren't all that tough to high AP weapons, so Blade Guard can still deal very decent melee damage, and trade a bit of the speed of the Sanguinary Guard for some insane durability with the Storm Shields. Again, their Strength 5 weapons are great with the +1 to wound. Finally, to lead alongside them, I think things like Smash Captains with the Gift of Foresight are really good for the points. Gift of Foresight is just a level above most other Warlord traits, as it gives them far stronger melee damage with 1 extra reroll to hit and wound, but also drastically improves their durability, allowing them to reroll 1 invul save per turn. Combine that with a relic weapon, and you've got a very hard-hitting character that's not really all that easy to shift. Plenty of other interesting options for the Blood Angels though. I think that Incursors are quite strong, they're good in most Space Marine lists, but that extra AP -1 on the charge can make them a legitimate charge threat as well. Death Company are a bit more fragile and do have their downsides, but the Forlorn Fury is a really nice option for giving them a first turn charge. Inceptors are of note with Descent of Angels giving them +1 to their hit rolls, and basically any other assault units are also worthy of note. Vanguard veterans with Lightning Claws, and anything with Strength 4 attacks such as Assault Intercessors or Outriders is better in Blood Angels, as they get the +1 to wound, making them better against more things. Next we have their Angels of Death partners in the Dark Angels. Certainly one of the strongest armies since their new decks dropped. The units that I chose to pick were Deathwing Terminators, Attack Bikes, and the Ravenwing Apothecary. I'm sure most people know why the Deathwing are so strong right now. Insanely durable, with only being wounded on a 4+, good damage dealing because they're Terminators, and they get objectives secured as well. It can cause a problem for a lot of armies just to have a whole bunch of these with Thunderhammers and Storm Shields, jumping onto the midfield objectives and holding them for dear life. Dark Angels are also perhaps one of the best chapters for Attack Bikes as well. One unit can get a pre-game move, allowing them to get an optimal alpha strike. Their Jinx special rule can give them a 5+ invul, which they can increase to a 4+ if they advance, and still fire their heavy weapons. And they get a bit of extra movement in their unique Devastator doctrine. The Ravenwing Apothecary again is strong like all apothecaries, but because he's a bit tougher as he has a bike and is miles faster, means that he isn't quite as limited to just hanging around with a gun line. He could probably move up to support the exact unit that you want to, if you need him to. To be honest, Dark Angels are really well rounded. Almost every single unit can be well worth it with them, with their various overlapping chapter tactics. Other things of particular note though are Ezekiel, who can use Interromancy to either really buff a melee unit, strip some obsec, or strip auras from a unit. Ravenwing Bike Squads and Outriders, who can get some really fast, tough obsec on the board, and anything with plasma weapons, such as big units of Inceptors or Black Knights, all of which can get damage 3 shots with weapons of the Dark Age. I'd probably add just about any static gunline unit to the list as well. Getting +1 to hit is a really nice firepower buff. Next up we come to the Space Wolves, and the 3 units I chose for these guys are Wolfguard, Thunderwolf Cavalry, and Beyond the Fell-Handed. Again, as a melee chapter, you really want to have some decent damage dealing units to hold the line. Wolfguard are pretty excellent for that, and I quite like the way that both the Terminator and the Jump Pack loadout are insanely flexible. You can have some really nice combos such as Lightning Claws and Storm Bolters, and mix up different weapons like Power Fists with Storm Shields. Space Wolves have a ton of ways to make melee very scary, and in particular they tend to be strong with Power Fists and Thunderhammers, the -1 to hit being counteracted by their chapter tactic. I think Thunderwolf Cavalry are also worth a shout as well. Per point I'm not sure they've got quite the same raw might as Wolfguard, but they make up for it for being incredibly fast, being able to bound across the board with advancing and charging. They're still hard-hitting enough to rinse most enemy units in a single round of combat. I also think that Beyond the Fell-Handed is well worth consideration. He's got a bit of accurate firepower, a reroll aura to give everything nearby reroll 1s to hit, and compared with most other dreadnoughts, both his damage output and durability in combat are really strong indeed. If he is screened as he's moving up, I think he's always going to be a problem unit for the opponent. Otherwise, again, Space Wolves are going to be fairly efficient with virtually every melee unit and character in the game. I find the Longfangs quite interesting as well, particularly as they have that cheap stratagem to shoot with no penalties to moving, and Bloodclaws are an interesting alternative to Assault Intercessors, being a little bit cheaper for a very similar melee damage profile. Finally, we'll round up with the Deathwatch. The 3 units that I picked are Deathwatch Veterans, or the kill teams that they can comprise, Redemptor Dreadnoughts, and Deathwatch Librarians. I think that the kill teams don't really need all that much explanation. They're one of the single most flexible datasheets in the entire game, and can mix up durable storm shields with powerful shooting of all sorts, and then even mix in different squad members if they want to. Their special issue ammunition makes them that bit more hard-hitting than normal, and the Deathwatch Codex is basically just entirely built around buffing infantry units like this. There are a crazy amount of strats, character buffs, and options. I think Redemptor Dreadnoughts are going to be a popular choice in a Deathwatch army. They add a fair bit of the raw strength and decent long-range firepower, and they're a really good choice to put next to the Dominus Aegis, that shield that gives them a 5+ invul save, making them a massive pain to remove. Finally, I thought the Deathwatch Librarians were worthy of a particular mention. Most of their characters are quite good. They can bear nice relics such as the Dominus Aegis or Beacon Angelis, but I think that the Librarian with his Xenopurge discipline is pretty good for being able to hand out a 5+ feel no pain to one of the Deathwatch squads that's pushing forward. Compared with most other chapters, I feel like Librarians are particularly handy in Deathwatch. Otherwise, I think that particular strengths are OBSEC Outriders or Bike Squads from kill teams, deep striking units with their Teleportarium stratagem, things like Eradicators or Assault Centurions, and their leaders can bear some interesting options, including the Beacon Angelis to teleport a squad into the midfield and get a nice alpha strike on the opponent. So that brings us to the end of our review of Codex Space Marine chapters and some of the strongest units that they can field respectively. I'll certainly have missed some solid options for them, there's quite a lot to cover here, so please let me know down in the comments what I have. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k content coming. I try and have new videos coming out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which is what allows these videos to keep on coming quite so often. If you are enjoying regularly, any support is absolutely massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing a fair few videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular monthly prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.